Welcome to our channel, your gateway to unfiltered political speeches and interviews from across Ireland. No edits, no commentary, just real voices shaping the nation. Subscribe now and stay informed with us every day.
Year after year in the course of this government, our position is clear. We think third level fees should be abolished. We outline that in our alternative budget every single year. We should have free third level education in this country, as we have, or supposed to have, free primary education and free second level education. Second point, one of the issues we'll be raising on order of business is a demand that the government has a debate and schedules a motion about Ireland's participation in what's called SAFE, this programme to borrow 150 billion euros on an EU basis, to then hand that money over to the EU armaments industry. This is part of the so-called Rearm Europe project, which is part of this global new arms race, which is going to see massive expansion of the amount of money countries are spending on the military. It can't be kind of separated from the NATO agreement to go to 5% of GDP on military expenditure. This is part and parcel of that. And contrary to what the government is saying, that this is about getting kind of good value for money in what Ireland is buying. No, this is not about good value for money. This is about money to the EU armaments industry. The key condition under which you can access these loans, which will have to be paid for, is that 65% of it is being spent on the European armaments industry. So these are big French companies, big German companies, big Italian companies that are making money from the increasingly unsafe world that we are living in. And it's outrageous that the government, that when Rearm Europe was introduced, the government said that they would engage constructively, not that they would join in. And yet now they're going to participate in SAFE, which is a part of Rearm Europe, which explicitly Ursula von der Leyen said this is about strengthening the European armaments industry. So at the very, very least, we need to have a debate and a vote in the Dáil about whether Ireland should participate in this. Thirdly and finally, obviously the genocide in Palestine continues to worsen. People probably saw the pictures from yesterday at the cafe in Gaza, where over 30 people were killed in total. I think at least 74 people were killed in Gaza yesterday. Unfortunately, that's kind of the regular numbers. People being shot down every single day while queuing for food under this so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is using aid as a weapon of war to pursue ethnic cleansing and then slaughter people when they're queuing for food. So the genocide worsens. It is armed, supported, financed by the big Western powers, and yet some of those Western powers are less focused on stopping this genocide, of pressurising Netanyahu and the Israeli state, but instead on policing the language of artists and musicians. I have to say, I got a push notification after Glastonbury on Saturday, saying, oh, the police are going to investigate. Police have opened an investigation into Niqab again. This is the third investigation into Niqab and into Bob Vylan. Just incredible that the British state is more interested in criminalising artists that speak out against genocide, that speak out about the genocidal institution that is the IDF, rather than the actual genocide that is happening, the slaughtering of well over 50 people, basically every single day in Gaza. And that should be our focus. Obviously this week, the committee hearings on the Occupied Territories Bill, or the kind of revamped Occupied Territory Bill, starts. For us, a bottom line is we need to include services. There's no legal justification has been presented. They've said there's a legal justification, but they haven't presented it yet in terms of the cutting out of services. So we'll hear what they have to say in terms of their justification, but the opposition will be pushing very, very hard for the inclusion of services, which make up a majority of our trade internationally, and which are covered by the International Court of Justice ruling, which says we should have no economic relationship, no trade relationship, no investment relationship with the illegally occupied territories.
Well, are you disappointed the Minister won't be in the committee this week to talk those issues through?
Yes, I am. I mean, what's interesting is that the Minister is, there is a difference of tone between Simon Harris and Micheál Martin on this, where Micheál Martin is pretty dismissive anytime you ask questions about including services. He was pretty dismissive last week when either Ruth or I can't remember which of us was it that asked about it, was really dismissive, or actually maybe Catherine Connolly asked about it. Whereas when Simon Harris is asked about it, he says, we're not close to this. Kind of, his vibe is we would like to include services, but there's some legal issues. We need to see if we can work through them. But then it's a bit of a problem when the person who's saying this isn't going to be present in the committee to actually engage on these issues. I have to say, I'd be very surprised if the government concedes on including services. I don't really believe the language of, we're interested in the serious engagement, but let's see. But the ball is very firmly in the government's court on this one.
Well, were the people before profit involved in the talks for an opposition joint candidate in the presidential election? Is that idea now dead, or where is it at?
No, I read all these stories saying that this new candidate is going to be a candidate, or this idea is dead. I'm telling you, I don't think there's any basis for that. I'm involved in those discussions. We're looking to... People for Profit is very enthusiastic about the idea of a joint left candidate. We think with the right candidate, with the right kind of platform, we could win the presidency. We could have a left candidate in the presidency. Again, obviously there's no guarantees. From our perspective, and I think this is objectively true, this process is very much still alive. We have a long way to go until the presidential elections. We've long enough now. I will be very hopeful that we will have progress towards a joint left candidate before the Dáil recess. I think there is a meeting being scheduled probably for next week to pursue this.
Do you realise that's 2 weeks' time? You're going to have a candidate in 2 weeks' time?
No, I'm not saying we'll have a candidate.
What are you saying?
I'm saying, people, this is all public information, right? That obviously Sinn Féin is having its own internal process about whether they're running a candidate or not. That's fair enough. They're a political party that are entitled to have that process. That is pretty crucial from the perspective of their being. So if they're going to have their own candidate, well then there isn't going to be a joint left candidate, certainly including Sinn Féin, because they'll have their own candidate and people will have to determine their approach to that. My understanding, I don't know exactly when that was due to end, but it's around now that that's due to end. So therefore it makes sense to come back together for Sinn Féin to report on their internal processes, to say whether Sinn Féin, are they interested in pursuing further a joint left candidate, or are they going to go their own way? And that's a choice for them to make. But I don't see the evidence for the article saying that this is not going to happen, that Sinn Féin are going to run their own. I think they have a genuinely internal process themselves. That's fair enough. And then the next step will be to come back together and to see where they're in that. And I think that's what a meeting next week, for example, would be about that. And then rapidly enough, if we're all in the space, or whoever's in the space of going for a joint candidate, moving towards selecting that candidate.
Just to clarify,
yeah.
You're currently trying to organise a meeting next week about this, but nothing's said.
Yes, but this is not this is just people talking, saying, yes, we need to have a meeting. We met a while ago. And then, and again, all this is open, is that, Sinn Féin has their own internal process. So while that's going on and they're deciding whether they're going to run their own or not, there wasn't really a point in us meeting a bunch to talk about it. Once this comes to an end, then there clearly is a need for us to come back together. And again, to be clear, we in People for Profit are very enthusiastic. We think it's important that there's a joint left candidate for a few reasons. One, because we think it can be won, and we think Michael D. Higgins is an example of how that position can be quite important in a context of genocide, in the context of the rise of racism and homophobia. Having a progressive left voice in the presidency is politically important. But two, because if it can be done, we think it is a certain building block for the future in terms of this next general election. And obviously we're very clear, we want there to be a left government. We want the other parties to rule out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and this will be, from our perspective, a step in that direction. And I still think... yes.
Go on.
I'm not going to tell you.
Throw out a few.
I will not.
Yes or no?
What do you reckon of Joe Duffy?
What do I reckon of Joe Duffy?
Not in general.
3 out of 5. No comment.
No comment, so that makes it sound like you're looking at him.
No comment on Joe Duffy.
Okay.
Maybe
Anyone
support
else?
Catherine Connolly now that Francis Black is withdrawn her name.
I mean, look, I'm not going to get into names. We've been explicit in terms of the meetings we've had not to get into names because I don't think it's helpful to have a big...
Well, it might not be helpful to you, but...
It might be helpful to you for your stories.
But just on the names, sorry,
Yeah.
like, have you you say you floated a name, or names, have you got candidates that would be willing to run, or is it more like blue sky thinking, here's someone that we might ask?
I'm not going to go into that. Just because, look, we're involved in a process. Sinn Féin has its own process. We have a joint process. We're enthusiastic about it. We don't want to do anything that would scare any horses off, be they potential candidates or be the other parties. Hopefully, I would emphasise, I don't personally, and maybe I'm wrong, but like all these stories saying this is not happening, I don't believe that's true. I still think my personal opinion is it's more likely to happen than not. I could be wrong, and I hope there'll be progress in the next couple of weeks.
If Sinn Féin go their own way, will the other parties still put forward a candidate, or is that...
I think then we'll be in a different space and we'll need to consider that. So I think that's certainly something that will be considered, but certainly from our perspective it's much preferable that Sinn Féin would be a part of this.
You're not putting yourself forward, no?
I'm not putting myself forward. Right? That's a name I can definitively
You're
rule out for you. Yeah.
Thank you for watching. If you want to stay connected with the most important voices in Irish politics, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Here you get unfiltered access to political debates, speeches, and interviews, straight from the source, every single day. Be informed, be engaged, right here with us.